Well, hello, Sandy. Happy podcast day.
Amy, happy podcast day. I like the sound of spring season. How about that?
Uh, well, we're not there yet. We're still in January, but okay. For all of our listeners, thank you for joining us today for Your Real, Your Ideal. And today we're talking about the word enough. Like what's enough? When do we have enough? And there's a little bit of a story that brought this to us. And Sandy, do you want to share the story?
Sure. I was perusing LinkedIn like we always do, and I had a story that caught my eye that had a picture of a mother and a daughter that were hugging. And I tell you, the mother was elderly, the daughter was probably our age. And how the story read is that the elderly mother was giving a goodbye, and her last words to her daughter, her parting words were, "I wish you enough." And the writer of the article said she asked the daughter what that meant. And the daughter said that was the last time that she and her mom thought they'd see each other because her mom had a bad health issue. And so that was kind of their farewell goodbye words after this trip. And I wish you enough was her daughter, the mother wanting her daughter to have a life filled with just enough good things to sustain her and bring her happiness. And the story went on to say, too often we strive for more and more rather than what is enough. As Americans, we live in a culture that idolizes getting the most money, the biggest houses, the most stuff, and the most extravagant experiences. And then the author went on to do a little research, and there is a poem behind I Wish You Enough. And so here's the poem. I wish you enough sun to keep your attitude bright. I wish you enough rain to appreciate the sun more. I wish you enough happiness to keep your spirit alive. I wish you enough pain so that the smallest joys in life appear much bigger. I wish you enough gain to satisfy your wanting. I wish you enough loss to appreciate all that you possess. I wish you enough hellos to get through the final goodbye. And I just thought that was beautiful. And I also thought, what a great way to challenge ourselves to strive for enough. Do we have enough rather than we need more, more, more? What
Right.
is enough? And for in any situation, what is enough? And I've used the words in this example in trying to talk through those sweet spots, things we've talked about in the past, the U-shaped curve, the fact that happiness isn't this linear more, 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 more going up the ladder, but instead, what is that sweet spot? What is enough? And
Yeah.
that enough, it isn't too less, it isn't too much, and everybody's enough might be different, but what a beautiful thing to try to achieve is enough, because if you have enough, you basically have happiness and satisfaction and contentment. So, what were your initial feelings when you read that?
Well, when I read it, it resonated with me. Last podcast about taking things for granted,
Hmm.
because it was that balance of happiness or and pain, so that you cherish the happiness or you cherish the joy. It's that balance of the sunshine and the rain,
Right.
so you don't take the sunshine for granted. So it kind of brought that about. And then I have a proverb that I love, and I've loved it for years. It's a Finnish proverb, and it's happiness is a place between too little and too much. And I apply that to so much of my life, like too much time versus not enough time, or too much stuff versus not enough stuff, too much to drink versus not a drink. You know what I mean? Like there's this whole just finding the happy middle and being satisfied with that too, and knowing that that's the sweet spot. It's not, more is not better.
An example I thought about is money. Okay. And again, money might sound like it's the easy one, but I think about all of my years in financing, all of my years in um, seeing what people have, what they think they have, their financial planning, what is enough. Think about our stage in life now. We're coming to fruition of our retirement planning, and it's not this infinite amount of time later that we're trying to get to. So how much is enough? And one thing I thought about is, so often people think how much is enough. It's about how much people are making. How much is enough? How much do I need to make? But enough isn't how much you make, but it's how much you have. And then it goes one step further. Enough is how much you have, okay, and what you're doing with it. And if that brings you happiness. And if you really were to say, how much is enough money, you need to change your mindset and not think about it as a dollar amount of how much I make or how much I have in my bank account, but how much I have, right? I have a house, I have a home, I have a lifestyle that I enjoy. Because sometimes too much adds more burden, right? We've talked about multiple houses. You could say somebody has 4 houses. Oh my gosh, they're loaded. They're so lucky. Well, number one, you don't know if there's debt that goes with those houses. And there certainly can be an intangible burdens in caring for them, traveling to them, and the things that go with that.
Completely. So I found an article, and it was, when do we have enough? And the defined enough as much as is necessary in the amount or to the degree needed. What's necessary or needed is ignored in favor of what will bring us fleeting highs, external validation, and temporary admiration. That's like when we're striving for things that's really beyond enough, and it's not like just being content with the enough piece.
And being able to say enough is a personal thing, and it's not about how people look at you. It's not about what others think or what you're told, because enough is different for everyone.
Right.
Enough
And this is another piece. When enough is no longer enough, we're destined for disappointment. When we focus on how we'll achieve our next milestone, mistakenly believing that each new accomplishment will solidify our standing or improve it, we seek bigger spaces to fill with bigger and better things, hoping that square footage will lead to lasting contentment. We chase novelty and fleeting trends and passing crazes, forgetting that these two are designed to leave us in a constant state of yearning. So I was thinking about that statement right there, that constant state of yearning and the outside influences that drive that versus just being content with what you have and being okay with what you're doing with your time, what you're doing, just being content, feeling that contentment.
Garrett, my husband, and I were talking about, I guess we were actually talking about the 7 deadly sins. And where this came from, if anybody watches White Lotus, there's been 2 seasons out, and my niece told me that she had read there are to be 7 seasons, and every season would end in the death of one of the 7 deadly sins. So of course, and I'm going to look that up now, we were looking up 7 deadly sins. And one thing I tell you is I got to thinking, because this is top of mind with enough, is a lot of the 7 deadly sins have to do with not enough. So if you think about gluttony, okay, that's an easy one. Not enough, right? Envy, constant yearning, that almost you get into that state because you weren't happy with enough, or you couldn't find it, or were trying to find the wrong thing, but it really fits into that. And most of them fit into that. Pride. So it was interesting when I was looking at them, of the deadly sins, the one, and back to our conversation, then Garrett and I were talking about, which ones do we fall into more? What would be, and I said, for me, it'd probably be pride. And for him, it would probably be envy. And what we talked about with that is, like, again, everything has a different, but for him, envy was, boy, Do I have, should I have more at this stage in my life? Have I done something wrong? Should I have more? And I said, well, what constitutes that? Like, what is this? Because I mean, think about it. Most people would say, my gosh, they live in Durango. They're playing all the time. They're having fun. They're very content. You know, we have a nice
Yeah.
home. We have, so what in his mind is this enough? But it gets back to this phrase. And then we had a good conversation about, well, what is that? And really that's
Right.
comparison to others, right? Or something that back, even like in school, what should I, this, when you're doing that financial planning, that retirement planning, when you're in your 20s, you're setting these standards in your mind of how much you need. So it's way more than enough that you never have to worry about anything. But that's a
Right.
really bad ideal, because there is absolutely something to be said for too much.
Right. Yeah. And there's finding that balance between being miserable to get to that point where you have an overabundance,
Right.
you know, like you want to balance it out so that you're pacing yourself so that you're also enjoying life now and you're okay in the future too.
With all those things with it, but we put these things in our head, dollar amounts, multiples, how much that this pressure. And my comment to him was, boy, wouldn't that put a lot of pressure on you and what you need to get rid of before you die? Back to, we had a conversation, I think in season 1, about dying poor, right? That
Yeah.
the goal shouldn't be to die a multimillionaire. The goal would be do something with it while you're still alive. Wasn't there a
Right.
book called that?
Yes, it was like How to Die Broke,
How to
I
Die
think,
Broke. Yeah.
like that. I remember seeing it many years ago on Oprah, like probably 20 years ago. So I don't know if it's still in
Oh.
print or not, but it was good. All right. So one of the things that I found is some questions we can ask ourselves to try to find this enough, like seeking to understand what our enough is. And one of them is, what do I need to keep my body healthy? And so that's, the food you're eating, and that's what's enough and not too much.
Mm-hmm.
Where in my home do I feel most joyful, energized, relaxed, inspired? How can I tap into this feeling with what I already have?
That's great.
One of the things that I've noticed since we've moved here is because we were very intentional and couldn't bring a lot of stuff, is how little I have to take care of it and how much I enjoy everything I'm with. Like I look at it and I was like, oh, I like that table. Oh, I like this. And also, we need a piece of furniture for, I need a storage piece. Just gonna say, I need some more storage for like my crock pot. I don't have anywhere to put my crock pot. And so we're kind of looking for a piece, but I'm being very particular. Like I know exactly the size I want. I know exactly, I'm not gonna get too much. I'm not gonna get too little. I just want it to be just enough and just right.
Just enough.
I know.
Just enough. Rather than, buying extra and then it ends up being, if it is something something that isn't exactly what you wanted, I think there's a tendency to buy another one and then not wanting to get rid of what you have. And that's how we end up with multiple things, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Or we buy like the cheapest one, then we buy the medium price one, and then we finally buy the one we want.
The one we wanted to begin with.
Exactly. When I work with people, we do that a lot with clothing, like especially people who have children. Because, when kids are young, you'll see like t-shirts on sale and you'll be like, oh, I'm going to grab some of these t-shirts, knowing that the child wants this one, but we grab the ones that are in sale because we're parents and we know that they're going to wear out their clothes and yeah. But children and adults, we wear 20% of our clothes 80% of the time. And so what we do, what I always say is buy them the one they want and then don't buy the rest. And so they are filling their closet with the 7 shirts that they absolutely love.
Right.
And you're not maintaining all the ones you got on sale that they don't like because they're not going to wear those. They're going to wear the 7 that they love.
Right. Right. Do you think it's an innate human need to look for more? Do you think it's more cultural? Um,
I think
do you
it's
think it's male,
cultural.
female? I mean, what?
Well, I think it's cultural. And I say that because when I was an exchange student in Switzerland, um, I remember the family, they were probably upper middle class, I would guess, but I don't know exactly the family that I stayed with. And they had mid-century modern furniture, and this was in the 80s. So it was not trendy then. It was, you could tell they'd had it for a while, like it was well loved. Then Tom and I went back to visit in probably the late 90s, and they had the same furniture. And like they traveled, they did all sorts of things, but they kept what they purchased, and they were minimalist, I would say. They had some things, but they just so to me it's very cultural.
And that's what I've heard too.
Yeah.
But when we're raised in that culture, it's difficult to change the mindset.
Yeah.
Because people, I'll go back to my pride. Okay. Again, strong word, but I can pick up on when somebody's like, oh, her house isn't the biggest, or, oh, I used to be, the it girl. And now I'm just, one of these older ladies that does volunteer work and she does something online and, and
Yeah.
it kind of takes me aback sometimes. And I think, oh, Sandy, seriously, get over yourself, and then I actually kind of like it. But there is a little bit of, I'm like, oh, I actually kind of like it. Back to the enough. It actually makes me happy to be that sweet spot of this is all good and not be too shiny, because more is usually pretty shiny and flashy and out there. And then you
Noticeable.
actually, you get, when you're over enough, then you have to really watch out for authenticity in relationships. And it is interesting back to, because I'm not doing a lot of referrals. Why would I? I don't have every banker, attorney, wanting to network with me, right? And so then it's kind of back to pride, wow, but I'm happy and I have enough.
My connection isn't of value to them anymore. So it's kind of like, am I still of value?
So if we think about those questions you said, I can't say them all verbatim, but there'd be one that say, it talked about, what are your happy parts and the spots in your house? Are you happy in this spot in your career? Yeah, absolutely.
And there's more. I just read a couple of them, but yes. And one of them is, how does my present job enable me to find a greater sense of meaning or purpose?
And for me, it's great because I can help people, I can interact, I have enough time and flexibility to do other things. So why I don't need all those networks and connections to fill the pride of having more, right? Having more accomplishments, more attention, right?
I'm curious if successful people who have been successful in their careers transition to retiring with the needing to have the stuff to symbolize that they were successful. Or, I think that could possibly be a hard transition. If you are somebody who's like seen and noticed and respected, and then all of a sudden you go into retirement, you're like, okay, my job is no longer outwardly showing this value. So what do I have? How do I keep showing that value to be respected and that I was successful? and I was respected. So if, is it the house I live in, or is it what is it? I'm sure that would be a hard transition.
And I think I see a lot here of people that find other leadership roles in not-for-profits. I'm part of the entrepreneurial community that has some people that have had great businesses that have sold the businesses, retired, and they mentor other entrepreneurs. They find other things or leadership positions, or for some people it is the house or the status to say, okay, this shows this shows what I accomplished in the past. But then it kind of gets back to our conversation of enough. So you're showing that outwardly to everybody else, but we have a driveway that needs to be plowed and snow blown. And I see some of these humongous houses and I think, oh my gosh, thank goodness they have a service, but you still have to deal with the little stuff like the walks in the back and there's all kinds of things that you have to deal with that when I look around in winter, I'm like, I'm so glad that I don't have to do that or worry about fire. Of course I'm worried about fire, but I'd be taking my personal mementos out and everything else could be easily replaced.
Right, exactly. I always think about that with this place. I have half the number of toilets. I'm like, boy, that makes me happy. It's enough. All right. So there's the rest in this article. One of the things I highlighted was this. When we are enough for ourselves, we gravitate toward creating lives that prioritize our values over our possessions, that foster healthy, supportive relationships that enable us to recognize what we have control over and what we don't, and that continually allow us to connect with and share our strengths, and that provide a model for others to do the same. Which I love that, because when we are enough, we're not constantly seeking more or more affirmation or more of anything. It's just like, all right, we're good.
I loved the beginning where it said value over possessions.
I knew you would like that.
It's so true. Back to enough. If I think about my level of happiness, it's what I value and my values. And even I have a very small circle. And the comment Garrett said to me is part of my happiness is I don't deal with a lot of people crap, because I'm very selective in who I'm working with. And a lot of, if I'm working one-on-one with somebody, it's somebody who positively wants to change things for the better, right? So they're all in and engaged. And it's my tight circle. I'm very picky about friends, my family, and it's valued people. It's not just, and we've talked about this a lot. I don't have a lot of stuff. You don't either, because we both downsized, and I cherish and value every little piece that's in my house, just like you just talked about, and the people and relationships that are around me.
Yeah.
And it helps me focus on the well-being then too, because I find myself by like-minded people that, we're trying to hit the same goals.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Good for you. All right. So instead of seeking more, I invite you to seek enough. What's the real and what's the ideal in this?
Well, let's see. What's the real? The real is we are going to constantly struggle with thinking more is better, because that is our habits and mindset that we've acquired after many, many years of living in the culture that we have, whether it be in our work environment, people, it's just a culture that we live in. And so the real is it's something that in knee-jerk reaction is a feeling of more is always better.
Right. I need more. I need more. Yes.
Do I have enough? I need more.
Do I? Yeah.
I need more to be happier.
Yes. Right. I think you hit the real spot on. And yeah, keeping with, yeah.
And the other real is even if we change our mindset, other people don't have the same mindset many times. So you're still going to be judged. So you have to know how to not let that bother you.
Right. I think yes. And what I was thinking is the real is getting the confidence and having the confidence to know that you're okay just how you are and
Mhm.
not having to be measured by other people's stick. Like just stick with what you have and you're fine and not measure yourself against
Only
others.
you can measure your enough.
Right. Okay. So then the ideal is probably similar to the real. Don't compare yourself to others.
And take the
The
time to
ideal
measure your enough, you know, in anything. Why am I striving for this? Why is this bothering me? Why? And then add the enough principle and say, you know, back to your, I tried to write it down, but your finished proverb was happiness is the place between too much and not enough. Did I say that right? Or
too
close?
little, too little and too much. Yeah.
Too much.
Happiness is a place between too little and too much,
Okay.
which is just enough.
Mhm.
Middle. Enough is in the middle.
But being able to think through that and making the hard choices, right? Because you're going to get the happiness and contentment that comes with it if you're following what's enough for you
Right.
and how it's
Exactly.
aligned with you, what you value and your value set.
Right. And just learning to be grateful and content.
Mhm.
Finding that contentment in your heart. I think that's hard sometimes. All right. Well, thank you, Sandy. This was a good discussion.
I wish you enough too, Amy.
I wish you enough. Thank you.
All
Talk
right.
to you
Until
later.
next week. Bye.
Like, bye.